Daily plus the plot. What kind of experience is waking up next to Morax? Dao Yu said to sign a contract first. The life of becoming an ally with Morax is so simple and unadorned. Hey, Morax, stop slacking off. What should we do if the maintainer of the heavenly principle is a bit strange? The last time we met, we were all very friendly. This time, we were just facing each other with swords and swords, which is too much. But what do you mean when you see the 7 gods inviting me to Sky Island? Destroying Canria and disturbing me to admire the moon. What kind of story will happen when the departing people return to Liyue after the end of the Demon God War? Dao Yu said that children are really fun. When Morax retires and takes care of his children with Dao Yu, their life is really simple and unadorned. It's time to put aside your rigid ways of life. Chapter 1. Awakening. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I finally have some time today to deal with the content of this book. I hope that readers of this book can first read some of the words before the main text. There are many stages in this book. Before the War of the Demon God, it was the first volume, the War of the Demon God was the second volume, the third volume of Canria, the fourth volume of Ningguang and others when they were young, and the fifth volume of the Second Traveler's Awakening, which is probably these 5 volumes. Any changes will be announced in advance. The protagonist of this book is actually a lotus flower, which took shape shortly before the beginning of the War of the Demons and Gods, specifically in Chapter 114. She is the maintainer of the female protagonist's heavenly principles, that is, he. I have previously discussed with readers whether it is a single female lead or a multi-female lead. At the beginning, the author's idea was indeed that the single female protagonist Kiana, after all, from the perspective of lifespan theory, Kiana is the only person who can accompany Dao Yu to the end, and their strengths are also very matched. However, during the writing process, the author made some mistakes by writing that they fell in love with the character in the pen and inserted it into the camp. Therefore, there is only one female lead and 3 girlfriends. Secondly, the book has some poison points. For example, the reader roasts that he has been sleeping and forced to die. What other scumbag quotes are really the biggest poison of this book. If you don't really like this part of the content, you can skip it and read other parts. Mon's Demon War has significant fluctuations in its arrangement and writing. If you don't like this part of the content, you can choose to skip it directly. There may be inaccuracies and confusion in time in this book, and the plot progression requires further investigation. There are also some other things that will be covered in the following chapters. If you are interested, you can take a look. That's about it, so it won't affect everyone's reading. Omega, summary, put a dumpling in meta townhouse pitch black, all pitch black. There is no unsettling feeling, but rather like closing your eyes while sleeping, instinctively comfortable. I can't remember anything, I must have been sleeping. The feeling of confusion is not so annoying. Protect. A voice came from a distance, as if someone was saying something in my ear, but I couldn't hear clearly. Don't shake, why are you sleeping? Earth. It's really inhumane. A pitch-black lotus rose and fell in the puddle, surrounded by an oriental dragon that was coiled up and several tens of meters long. Its body was unpredictable, but it could be vaguely seen that it was a earthy yellow, with strange odors surrounding it, entering the dragon's body and finally being absorbed by the black lotus. Ah! The lotus let out a soft moan, as if awakened by a nightmare. You slept so comfortably, it just felt like the bed was a bit small. The lotus bloomed like a person stretching their body, enchanting and eerie. Ah! No, it's not that the bed is small, it's me. Lianhua was surprised and carefully observed her whole body. Dao Yu, the name in her memory, traveled from a distant earth to this place, and the cause of death is unknown. Dao Yu's gaze became strange, as if it were the perspective provided by a third-person game, where he could see his entire body. The position of the perspective was about 5 meters around it, and he could see his rough outline. That is to say, starting from a length of about 3 meters, the entire lotus flower area was not small, and there was obstruction that could not be fully seen. Dao Yu quickly calmed down and accepted the fact that he had become a lotus flower. Although I don't know where this is, doing less useless actions can ensure my safety. First, I need to understand the situation around me. Dao Yu controlled his own perspective, as if his eyes were at ease. Firstly, one can see that beneath their own lotus is a shallow puddle. The bottom of the lotus is adjacent to the yellow earth, and there is a lotus that exists alone without roots and stems. This means that one does not grow normally from the pool water, and that is why they are brought here. Slowly and leisurely pulling the field of view, the surrounding environment is very quiet. Since I was brought here, I have not moved to prove that I am temporarily safe. Dao Yu could feel himself swallowing like a human breath, without any hunger at all. It seemed that there was no need to worry about food. After all, the energy source of lotus flowers is a headache-inducing problem. As his gaze gradually moved outward from the puddle, Dao Yu saw a nearly 3-meter-high earthen wall. It was not suitable to say it was an earthen wall, as it shimmered with bright light and a faint feeling of scales, more textured and glossy than fish scales. Crossing the earthen wall, there was a night sky, and Dao Yu's vision was limited by the earthen wall, unable to see the condition of the earth. After not receiving more information, Dao Yu began to look around him and see this earthen wall. With the pull of the perspective, the top of the earthen wall, which only had a sense of scales, gradually covered with yellow fluff, from scratch, soft and elegant. However, when he turned around 180 degrees, Dao Yu saw a dragon head resting on a slender, fluffy tail, with a dragon claw underneath, similar to the Eastern dragon in film and television works. However, its body occasionally appeared, giving off the illusion of feathering. That is to say, one may not necessarily be on Earth. There should be no dragons on Earth, at least not in one's own impression. Dao Yu carefully observed the dragon and confirmed that it was in a strange state and had not woken up. Dao Yu then began to study his own body, which was the lotus flower. After transforming into a lotus flower, he needed to understand whether it could walk and make a sound, following his gaze. Dao Yu felt as if his body was lying on the ground now. Although his perspective could rotate in all directions, his body felt like he was lying down. Dao Yu made a stand-up gesture according to his own idea, and the lotus slowly rose and suspended in the air, which probably means standing up. As the lotus floated in the air, Dao Yu also saw the situation around him clearly. This is a mountaintop, surrounded by hills of varying heights, shrouded in clouds and mist, giving off a fairyland-like atmosphere. Dao Yu did not appreciate these beautiful scenery, but instead looked at the moon in the sky, which was obviously much larger. Dao Yu felt that he must not be on Earth anymore. Is today the night of the full moon? That's not right. After all, the situation in another world may be different from on Earth. Dao Yu decided to pay attention to the changes in the moon afterwards, but then he saw the moon moving slowly. That is to say, this moon should not be far from itself, not the distance from the original Earth. Dao Yu felt a bit strange. The moon was so close, it seemed that there was something different in this strange world from the changes on Earth. Dao Yu was about to retract his gaze when he followed closely and saw a floating object in the sky. From his perspective, it seems like an island. No, it should be said to be an island. Hanging garden. There are only things in the legend, which means that this world is different from the power system of Earth. If it is technology, it is at least 1 century ahead. If it is other powers, Dao Yu squinted his eyes. After all, his own lotus can be conscious, and there are other strange things to be curious about. Dao Yu had a keen eye for that island, and he had already guessed his location, but could not be certain yet. Continuing to study his own body, Dao Yu controlled his body to make a sense of walking, and the lotus flower drifted towards the front of his line of sight, while his own perspective followed closely behind, like walking with a fellow person. Afterwards, Dao Yu accelerated and stopped abruptly, confirming that he had a certain ability to escape. He had a certain confidence in his heart, at least not a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, so the next step was to speak out. Dao Yu expressed doubts about whether Lotus could speak, as the incredible ability of plants to speak is not very realistic. He has already prepared himself mentally. Cough. Dao Yu made a symbolic cough twice, his voice very low. He was worried about disturbing the dragon next to him, but he still heard his own voice, but he was not sure if others could hear it. It seems that the ability to make a sound still needs to be released. Dao Yu controlled his body and drifted towards the edge of the cliff. The test of his attack ability cannot be conducted on the edge of that dragon, otherwise if he wakes up the dragon, there may not be any good fruit to eat, although he does not eat fruit. Gripping his fist, Dao Yu felt a powerful energy gathering and waiting to unleash, controlling the force to decrease. He then gently smashed it towards the rock at the edge of the cliff, only to see a small black light flash past, and the 2-meter-high stone turned into dust. That is to say, there is a certain level of attack ability, although this attack ability may not seem explosive enough, Dao Yu's evaluation is that it is more explosive than Bo Ran. Chapter 2. Morax. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It seems that this world is indeed a place for practicing Dharma, whether it's magic or Taoism. Dao Yu felt that the level of danger in the world had greatly increased, and there were traces of physical attacks and the eerie magic that everyone knew. Dao Yu believed it was necessary to become a member of the broad range of those who pursued the Tao, at least before becoming the strongest in the world. It was also advisable to be low-key. Looking down the mountain, Dao Yu saw a well-arranged village. Unlike the towering buildings that can be seen everywhere on Earth, the villages below are mostly designed with ancient thatched cottages. Although such houses are convenient, there are always some hidden dangers. In addition to being flammable, anti-corrosion and moisture-proof work is also difficult to carry out. Dao Yu looked up at the sky, unsure if the world would thunder, but soon he was stunned. Where could it not thunder and rain? I hope it's not that he's being too cautious. He always has a false sense that this world is an immature world created, perhaps just the uniqueness of this world. In addition, Dao Yu's excellent eyesight allowed him to see the stone tools in the hands of the villagers. Since it was the Stone Age, thatched houses and the like did not seem so difficult to accept, and wooden houses may be better. Dao Yu didn't know that this continent had just calmed down the war. Although thatched cottages had hidden dangers, they had the advantage of low cost and could be quickly rebuilt after being destroyed. Dao Yu wanted to obtain more information from the village, but it was better not to run around when it was uncertain whether everyone in the village possessed magic. This idea is somewhat absurd. Dao Yu has a feeling of being persecuted and delusional, hoping that his own suspicion is too severe, rather than that the world is really like this. Dao Yu looked at the cliff at his feet, and his intuition told him that he could keep floating without falling, but his fear of heights as a human made him hesitant to try. After hesitating for a moment, Dao Yu closed his gaze and controlled his body to drift forward as if he were closing his eyes. There was no feeling of free fall, and don't ask how you knew about the feeling of free fall. He crossed over. Dao Yu opened his eyes and did not look under his feet. Instead, he shifted his gaze to the upper front, which was also a way to resist acrophobia. The gentle breeze blew through Dao Yu's body, feeling only a moment of comfort. Staring at the moon, he noticed that it gradually covered the island floating in the sky, and he felt a huge shock in his heart. That is to say, Sky Island should be above the moon. I am looking up ahem, this is not the point. The point is that this moon is likely just a creation, and Dao Yu cannot feel the energy on the moon. This big moon has no other use besides lighting. He felt a bit frightened, and as a newcomer to the other world, he was somewhat alarmed when he saw this incredible thing. In just a moment, peace was restored, and once he arrived, he settled in. Dao Yu took a deep look at the Sky Island and drifted back to the middle of the dragon. Since it is a dragon, it should not be weak. If it is not weak, it means that one's safety can be temporarily guaranteed. Continuing to lie in the middle of the dragon, Dao Yu felt a little relieved, and a wave of drowsiness surged up. Soon, he fell asleep. Open your eyes again, the sun in the sky has already emerged from the horizon. Dao Yu first glanced at the dragon beside him, and saw that the dragon was no longer in a state of uncertainty, but had completely solidified. It also had life and became a true living creature. If this dragon had previously given Dao Yu the feeling of being an object, now this dragon gives him a feeling of vitality, and Dao Yu can feel its breath. In addition, Dao Yu can also feel the majestic energy inside his body, just like you can tell from the muscles of a man that he is not easy to deal with. But Dao Yu didn't feel any threat to his life. It seemed that this dragon was similar to his muscles, even lower than a lion. Dao Yu dare not make hasty judgments. Stretching lazily, the lotus flowers bloomed on his body. Dao Yu did not feel hungry. He believed that he should maintain physical activity by absorbing energy from the air, otherwise he should be in a state of hunger. Dao Yu stood up and looked out, only to see grass sprouting from the stone that had previously turned into dust. He squinted his eyes, either because he had slept for a long time, or because the earth energy in this world was incredibly active. However, the best way to judge is to go to the edge of the cliff and see if the village at the foot of the mountain has changed. Dao Yu controlled his body and drifted towards the edge of the cliff. He saw that the thatched cottage at the foot of the mountain had disappeared and turned into a large wooden house, leaving only 1 or 2 thatched cottages standing quietly. It seems that I slept for a long time. Dao Yu felt a bit annoyed. This feeling of not having a sense of time made him feel annoyed. There was no calendar, no clock, and nothing planned, which really troubled him. Suddenly, there was movement from behind, and Dao Yu quickly turned his head. The dragon slowly lifted its head, as if a person who was fully asleep had stretched out their body. The coiled body stretched out, and it was only then that Dao Yu noticed that the dragon had 2 pairs of claws. The dragon's claws spread out, and a comfortable sound came from its head. How comfortable! Dao Yu felt a burst of surprise. Can a dragon speak Chinese? However, being able to understand its words, this sentence effortlessly entered Dao Yu's mind. However, Dao Yu felt as if he had seen this dragon somewhere before, while he was pondering. The dragon stood up and looked several floors high. There was a light yellow thing like eyeshadow on the head of the earth-colored dragon. A pair of golden eyes slowly opened and looked noble. Hello, it's nice to meet you. My name is Morax and I hold the authority over rock and contract. Upon hearing Long's self-introduction, Dao Yu realized that the dragon in front of him was a character from a game that used to exist on Earth. Although Dao Yu only helps others with daily liver activities, he still has some basic understanding of the characters, such as the rock god Morax in front of him. Dao Yu looked at the dragon that conveyed goodwill, pondered for a moment, and then introduced himself. Hello, nice to meet you, Morax. My name is Kuching, and I'm not sure what kind of power I hold, but I think we can become allies, maybe friends are also good. Dao Yu's voice came out, and he could tell that Morax in front of him must have understood, but his gaze was a bit off. I hold the power of rock and contract, and according to the principle of contract equivalence, you should tell me your real name so that I can feel the correctness of the other information you said. Morax had no ill expression in his eyes, only curiosity and doubt. In his view, Dao Yu had no reason or need to deceive himself. He couldn't understand why Dao Yu would deceive him. Chapter 3. Alliance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dao Yu found it very interesting. I didn't expect that the thing of power was so magical, which means that when he or Morax spoke, did any words touch the scope of the word contract. But now, when he wasn't thinking about these things, he awkwardly said, I'm sorry, Morax. I'm a fool, please don't mind. Protecting oneself is an instinct. Morax nodded to show understanding, but immediately asked, in my perception, your strength is no less than mine. Why do you still need to protect yourself and take a pseudonym? There was no doubt in his tone, giving Dao Yu a sense of oppression. However, Dao Yu saw Morax's confusion in his eyes, and it seemed that there was a reason why Lu Yun couldn't chat. The Emperor's table-lifting style of chatting dealt a heavy blow to Dao Yu. Morax must have passed down this skill from generation to generation. Although the Emperor did not have this problem in the future, the conversation with him now is really embarrassing. Please forgive my rudeness, no matter what, apologizing first to gain sympathy is definitely right, your body is really too oppressive. In front of you, my body appears slightly weak. Pursuing benefits and avoiding harm is a biological instinct, please understand. Is that so? Morax pondered, and from the perspective of Dao Yu, this statement was indeed a reasonable explanation. Morax was just asking a simple question, not wanting to make too much fuss over this issue. Let's talk about allies and friends. I happen to have this idea, and we can further discuss it. Dao Yu felt strange that even the word discussion could appear, indicating that Morax was either an extraterrestrial person or someone born with this knowledge. Seeing the village at the foot of the mountain and the Emperor who seemed to have just awakened, I thought of the Emperor's ability to govern Liyue for thousands of years and achieve remarkable achievements in the later prosperous Liyue port. It seems that these knowledge are innate, including the incredible power. That's exactly what I mean. Dao Yu didn't mind having a thigh to protect himself in the future, but he needed to be careful not to let go of his abilities. As the saying goes, if you rely on a mountain, you will fall, if you rely on everyone, you will run. However, in the end, your alliance with Morax still falls into the demon war, and improving your own strength is particularly important. Dao Yu suddenly realized that demons such as Morax could sense the breath of extraterrestrial beings, and they usually point it out. It is currently unclear whether Morax knows he comes from outside the sky, and what attitude the demon god has towards people from outside the sky. It is still unclear, so it is better to be slightly cautious in conversations. Seeing Dao Yu's agreement, Morax nodded his dragon head. He did not feel any unusual aura, but only felt caution and the desire to cooperate from Dao Yu. Since that's the case, let's first talk about the matter in our jurisdiction. My memory tells me that this land should be governed by me, but since you are my ally, it is only natural for the land and people to give you some management. His voice was neither urgent nor slow, just stating the facts. Dao Yu was surprised. This is a declaration of sovereignty. Morax means this land belongs to me. Do you want it? This gave Dao Yu a feeling of facing Tu Shan Honghong. Tu Shan, I covered it, understand. How can Dao Yu answer? It must be, understand, understand. Although Morax understood in his heart that he was declaring sovereignty, he had to continue with this statement and could not show his cowardice. Who knows if he would suddenly rise up and eat himself. Dao Yu looked at the petals on his body. Although they looked poisonous, he didn't know if Morax had any taboos, but the energy contained in them probably made the demon drool. Dao Yu couldn't help but feel that the world was so dangerous. This is nature, Dao Yu replied calmly, but for the management of the land people, I am not very good at it, so I don't really want to govern a region alone. On the contrary, since we are allies and friends in verbal terms, I think it is more reasonable for us to jointly govern this land. There are specialties in the field, and each person should fulfill their own duties. Morax increasingly felt that collaborating with the lotus in front of him was an incredibly correct thing. After all, he had just woken up and had no understanding of some things. The inheritance in his memory tells him to love others, but how to love others requires him to explore on his own. With such an ally, he can also relax and avoid many detours. I can accept your suggestion. With your assistance, our land can become more prosperous. Although Morax has just woken up, his ability to draw pancakes is still top-notch. He has a completely different view on the word alliance. In his philosophy, a contract is just a regulation that binds both parties, and he did not expect that a contract could also bring benefits to himself. If Dao Yu were a human now, his face must have turned green. He is familiar with the skill of drawing pancakes. In his past life, the boss did not draw too many, but it is the first time he has seen someone who only draws pancakes without paying a salary. Has Morax already recognized my identity as an outsider? Do you feel like there's no way to suppress me directly and want to slowly figure it out? None of the old people are really good at it. Despite his fear, Dao Yu could only nod in agreement. At least the two could maintain a superficial balance. On the other hand, this is also a very profitable thing for Dao Yu. On the basis of this friendship, Dao Yu further proposed his own idea. Since we are allies, we cannot take action against each other. Hands-on not only harm harmony, but also the land and people we need to protect with all our heart. Therefore, before discussing specific governance plans, we need to constrain both parties in this regard to prevent disasters from happening. Dao Yu makes himself appear sincere enough. Morax hesitated for a moment and agreed, but he did not expect to overlook this matter. After all, although the two were allies, they should also avoid backbiting each other. Not to mention that Yu's strength is even higher than him, Morax increasingly feels that Dao Yu is genuinely allied with him, and actively proposes binding regulations to make Morax more satisfied with Dao Yu's vision. Seeing Morax nodding in agreement, Dao Yu felt a chill in his heart. It seems that Morax is more guarded against him than against himself. As soon as this proposal was proposed, Morax agreed. It seems that he has been waiting for it for a long time. He fell behind in negotiations, damn it, old fox. The negotiation between the two was not known to the world this time, but later on, when Dao Yu thought of his crazy behavior, he felt extremely embarrassed. Morax occasionally used this incident to mock Dao Yu's suspicion. The two fought and frolicked, but their relationship never changed. From this moment on, the two became true friends. Chapter 4 Title: You are on vacation. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Dao Yu and Morax discussed for a whole day, developing a rough framework from protection regulations to legal principles, and then to specific development plans. Dao Yu's modern insights and knowledge have broadened Morax's horizons. Similarly, Morax's ability to use Glitch AS has left Dao Yu feeling overwhelmed. However, after agreeing that the two of them could not take action without reason, Dao Yu's guard relaxed a lot, which made Dao Yu willing to share some governance experience with Morax. Overall, the conversation between the two was very pleasant. By the way, Morax. Dao Yu has always been curious about where his knowledge comes from. He has just been discussing governance, but has overlooked this aspect. Now you can ask, perhaps it can be used to determine whether Morax knew he was an outsider, and, the deity who stopped the traveler. Morax listened attentively and was now quite satisfied with this ally, responding to every request. Please speak. Dao Yu spoke slowly and said, Are your knowledge, abilities, and authority all innate? Dao Yu floats on the edge of the cliff, with Morax lying on the rocks beside him. A dragon and a lotus gaze at the village below the cliff. No, it's not, Morax replied after a little thought. Without waiting for Dao Yu to ask further, Morax took the initiative to say. Part of my knowledge comes from memory inheritance, and the other part comes from Sky Island, which is the floating island over there. Morax pointed to Sky Island and said, I'm surprised you asked this question. It seems like you're different from me. Dao Yu still feels very strange. Is there really a biological being born with advanced memories? And the notion that knowledge comes from Sky Island sounds unbelievable. In fact, I woke up earlier than you. My memories are not from memory inheritance, but the result of my own accumulation over time. I also did not experience the knowledge from Sky Island. Morax remained silent for a moment. I feel that you are different from me. Perhaps you are different from the vast majority of demons in the world. Your situation is very similar to that of an outsider, but you do not have the aura of an outsider. He turned his head and stared at Dao Yu. I'm afraid I can't answer this question. In my opinion, your question is as difficult to understand as asking why the world is like this. Is that so? Dao Yu remained silent for a long time. From Morax's words, he knew that his lotus body was likely native to this world, but his soul had crossed over. This conjecture is likely correct, but evidence is needed to determine. So what is the aura of outsiders? When Dao Yu asked Morax this question, Morax tilted his head. For example, it's like a group of white swans mixed with the only black swan that catches people's attention. Of course, this involves the soul level, not the body. Dao Yu frowned tightly, although he didn't have it now, and he could feel that he had definitely traveled through time. Since he had traveled through time, how could he not have any external aura on his body? Or another even more terrifying possibility is that his memory was implanted, and Dao Yu could clearly feel that he had lost a part of it. I think if you want to understand these issues, we demons like us may not be able to solve them. You can seek help from the one on Sky Island, who must know more. Morax saw that Dao Yu had remained silent for a long time, and he couldn't bear his friend to be so conflicted. He gave a suggestion. But she only exists in my inherited memory, and I don't know how to meet her. I thank you, originally because Morax had hope in the first half of his sentence, Dao Yu, but also because Morax had a cold heart in the second half of his sentence. He finally couldn't help roast. Morax, if you can't talk, can you stop? Morax felt very strange and didn't know why Dao Yu had such an emotion. He said calmly. I was just stating the facts and didn't have any other meaning. In my memory, the only thing about her was acting on behalf of heaven's duty in doing things related to love, and besides that, it was just her appearance. Dao Yu also knew that Morax was stating the facts and sighed lightly. This matter ends here. Let's jointly govern this land under our feet. How about giving this land a name? Dao Yu shifted the topic and suppressed some thoughts. Morax nodded and agreed that a good name could indeed bring belonging and happiness to the people, as he looked up at the clear moon in the sky. Dao Yu could clearly feel his dragon eye squint and say, let's call it Liyue. Dao Yu was curious about the origin of this name and asked, why is this name called? Does this moon have any special meaning? Or is it simply because he saw the moon and thought of this name? Morax turned to Dao Yu and said, your power system is different from mine. I can feel that your power is constantly increasing, even during the day. And my source of strength is moonlight. Although I didn't seek your opinion, I believe this name is the most appropriate and can lead the people of Liyue to go further. Dao Yu was shocked. The last time he woke up, he clearly felt that there was no energy present on the moon. He quickly looked at the moon and indeed felt a powerful energy on it, or rather, the moon seemed more like a transformation device. Looking back on the sun during the day, it looks more like a moon emitting red light. It is currently unknown what role the sun has. That is to say, Morax's authority is likely to come from the moon. The power of the moon gave birth to demons such as Morax, and through the moon, it also transmitted some knowledge to demons, expressing love while gradually controlling the direction of the world after them. However, these were not things that Dao Yu needed to care about. After a moment of contemplation, he agreed to Morax's proposal. I don't have any objections. People who go out often look at the moon to miss their hometown, so the moon is also a kind of support for their hometown. Morax looked at Dao Yu's lotus body and pondered. Since Dao Yu had not taken the initiative to say something, he would not have taken the initiative to ask. Morax vaguely guessed that Dao Yu came from outside the sky, but Dao Yu did not have the aura of the outside world. However, there is no possibility of backstabbing between the two now, and if there is a threat to the world, that person should take action. Dao Yu looked at the mountain village at his feet and suddenly thought of something. Morax, do you think these villagers will recognize us? Morax was taken aback, as if it was a problem. They were not sure if the villagers knew about their existence, but they still had to fulfill their responsibilities. Chapter 5. Missing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Morax searched his memory and slowly spoke. Although they don't know us, there is an example in the past history of that person helping the people. Although there were later wars and different demons oppressed the people around us, we showed our identity and showed our great power, and the villagers respected us. Dao Yu turned his gaze to Morax and said, as you said, they will respect us instead of accepting us and acknowledging our existence. If people cannot recognize us, we cannot lead the people to live a life of abundant food and clothing. This may contradict the meaning of that, so we need to find a way that the people can accept. Morax's dragon whiskers fluttered with the evening breeze, and he couldn't understand why Dao Yu was conflicted in this regard. Dao Yu, my memory tells me that it's not that difficult to gain people's recognition. To make people accept us, we can become human beings, and my memory tells me that beautiful women are more easily accepted by people. So this is the reason why you became a goddess. Dao Yu thought of the story where it was said that the demon god of rock had appeared in people's vision as a human woman. Is it because of this reason that he stayed up for a long time? Dao Yu thought again that it seemed like the 7 heavenly gods of the 3 countries that had already been opened existed in the form of women, and he hoped it wasn't his mistake. So, what do you mean is that we become beautiful women and enter the village to gain their recognition? Dao Yu felt a bit unreliable, and he was not sure how the folk customs of Liyue were now. If it were the simple folk customs of Gotham City, wouldn't they just be fooled by it? Wait, can you become a human? Dao Yu suddenly thought of another thing. Morax tilted his head and said, why not? Just imagine what humans look like in your heart and you can become humans. As he spoke, he even demonstrated to Dao Yu on the spot, only to see a faint light flash past, and a woman similar to the Zhongli model in the game appeared in front of Dao Yu, without an Adam's apple and with a graceful figure. Dao Yu was suddenly amazed by the divine. The Emperor is capable of dealing with women, and he has truly transformed. You should know that Morax is a male dragon. To be honest, the female image of Morax has a tall and slender figure of 1.78 meters, a golden ratio of the whole body, and a pair of white and tender long legs just below the knee hem of the skirt. She has elegant and soft white hair, a face like a porcelain doll, charming corners of her eyes and a piece of pale yellow eyeshadow. Her temperament is dusty and dignified. Dao Yu looked at the female image of Morax and pondered slightly. What should he do if he really wanted to stick it? However, even if you start imagining yourself as a human before according to Morax, see if you can also transform into a human form. But although Dao Yu had already simulated his physical features without any difference, he did not transform into a human form. Morax stared at Dao Yu and couldn't help but frown when he saw that he couldn't transform into a human. He could feel that Dao Yu was missing something. Dao Yu also discovered this problem. While constantly trying to transform, he realized that he had lost an important piece. This feeling was like wearing long sleeves without arm support, empty. Dao Yu reluctantly gave up, but when he intentionally began to control the size of his lotus body, he was not hindered this time and successfully transformed into a fist-sized black lotus floating beside Morax. Unable to transform into a human form, it's better to become smaller by your side. I can feel that you seem to have lost something very important, Morax spoke, her voice carrying a feminine charm. This feeling, like a neatly cut half stone, should be that you lost half. Morax felt somewhat surprised, as only half of his energy was on par with him, and what was the situation when Dao Yu was complete? When Taoist fools saw that Morax had used an inappropriate metaphor, he was powerless to roast, but perhaps for the rock god who held the power of the rock, such a metaphor was the most reasonable. Dao Yu also felt this. Since that's the case, I have to follow you in this form. Dao Yu's tone was a bit low, but he was also helpless. After all, this was not something he could change and could only passively accept. Morax reached out and touched the lotus petals of Dao Yu as a sign of comfort. Unlike the seductive appearance, the lotus petals feel like delicate silk to the touch, and are very delicate, without causing any discomfort to him. On the contrary, he can feel his breath becoming more stable, which means his strength has been consolidated, which surprised Morax. Unlike Morax, Dao Yu could only feel that he had been touched, and there was no particularly strange feeling. The only strange thing was that the hands of the Morax women emitted a refreshing fragrance. Yes, he could smell it. After a moment of contemplation, Morax slowly spoke up. I can probably guess that the other half you lost must be a lotus flower that is completely opposite in color to yours but complements each other. It is highly likely to be a white lotus flower, whose function is to stabilize the mentality of living beings and enhance their transformation ability. After all, you just look ominous, but touching you doesn't make me feel uncomfortable, which is strange. Morax spoke softly as he gradually fell in love with the feeling of rolling lotus flowers, no less than walking birds. Dao Yu nodded in agreement. Morax's guess was reasonable, but he didn't even know what breed he was, and his other half had no idea. Well, let's not dwell on this matter. Let's take a break and come down the mountain tomorrow. Morax asked in confusion. Why wait until tomorrow? We are going downhill at this moment, and the mountain road is rugged. When we reach the village, the sun will rise from the horizon. As he spoke, he had already taken steps towards the foot of the mountain. Dao Yu felt that Morax had some brain problems. Can't you transform into a dragon and fly down? Why do you have to walk down foolishly, or are you a walking dragon? Dao Yu's gaze towards Morax was filled with suspicion. Morax's body paused and he turned around. You're right, it's my negligence, he said as he spoke. He transformed into a dragon and continued to lie where he had risen, closing his eyes and taking a nap. The reason for taking a nap is because they cannot fall asleep. For example, if Dao Yu and Morax were to fall asleep, it would probably be some time later. Dao Yu didn't embarrass Morax either. He flew to the middle of Morax and also began to take a nap, but Dao Yu thought of Morax becoming a woman's appearance. How did this happen? Morax patiently answered the question of Dao Yu, it's just that she looks female. Dao Yu was surprised, the women's clothing tycoon couldn't afford to provoke him, he was so seductive. Data card. Dao Yu's awakening time, incomplete. The first time Black Lotus woke up was just after the end of the **** war, when Morax fell into a deep sleep. It has been 1,000 years since I woke up again, before the establishment of Tianheng. Chapter 6. Villages at the foot of the mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sun had not yet risen from the horizon, and the red glow had already filled the horizon. Morax called out Dao Yu, and the two of them began to fly towards the foot of the mountain. At this time, although it was not yet time for the villagers to go out and work, most of them had already gotten up. When they saw Morax flying down the mountain quickly, Dao Yu became too small to see, they quickly gathered the surrounding villagers to kneel and bow down. It's Lord Demon God. Lord Demon has awakened. Farewell to Lord Demon God. Their tone was excited and their expression was devout. Dao Yu suddenly felt that gaining the trust of the villagers was stable. But it shouldn't be the demonic aura on Morax's body that forces the villagers to kneel, he doesn't want to become the lone king of the tower. Thinking of this, Dao Yu carefully felt it and found that Morax had not leaked any demonic aura besides maintaining his own flight, nor had it affected ordinary people. Morax and Dao Yu flew straight towards the village, and upon landing, Morax transformed into a human figure, still portraying a female figure, gently landing in high heels. So the question is, since you can also fly in human form, why did you walk down the mountain last night? Why are you still flying in the form of a dragon today? Also, are you not afraid of going bankrupt? Dao Yu roast in his heart. As the two landed, the villagers became even more excited. Oh my God, it's Lord Demon, who has blessed us for hundreds of years. Surprisingly, Lord Demon is a noble dragon. However, although they were discussing in a low voice, occasionally glancing up at Morax, there was no hint of transcendence or impurity in their tone, which made Dao Yu marvel at the simplicity of the people's culture. After seeing Morax landing, he remained silent and Dao Yu spoke up first, there's no need for that. You guys should get up quickly. The villagers only then noticed the black lotus floating behind Morax, and became even more excited. There is also a demon god. It turns out that the fluffy food we usually eat is a gift from the gods. The villagers knelt and kowtowed to Dao Yu, but still had no intention of getting up. In their view, it was appropriate to kneel and worship the deity who protected them. Dao Yu had a headache. It seemed easy to gain the trust of the villagers, but it was because some of them were too enthusiastic. Morax's majestic voice rang out. "Get up!" The villagers looked at each other before slowly getting up, causing Dao Yu's petals to tremble. "My name is Morax, the demon god of rocks who blesses this place and holds the power of rocks and contracts. This is my friend Dao Yu, the demon god of lotus. In the future, when you see us too, you don't have to kneel down. It's your responsibility to protect you and not to perform this great gift." Lotus demon god. When did this happen? Morax, please make it clear. Dao Yu murmured roast in his heart. The villagers whispered about something, mostly about how gentle Morax was and how kind Dao Yu was. An elderly man slowly walked out of the crowd, and the villagers gave way one after another. Obviously, the old man was quite prestigious and should be the village chief of this village. Morax and Dao Yu looked at the old man, waiting for him to say something. The old man leaned on his crutch and bowed slightly, saying, "Respected Lord Morax, kind Lord Dao Yu, I am the village chief's inscription. It is our honor to meet you. Thanks to your protection for hundreds of years, the village has had its current life. Please rest assured, two adults. We will build statues for them and worship them day by day to show our gratitude." Dao Yu feels like he's about to lose control of his smile, engraved. "Give it your life." Morax lowered his eyebrows in contemplation, and Dao Yu spoke directly. "Old village chief, there's no need to be like this. We're not here for this, but to lead the villagers to a better life. Such laborious and wasteful actions go against our original intention." Morax also said. "The words of the Lotus Demon God are reasonable. You don't need to be so cautious. We are here to conduct field investigations and lead everyone to a happier life." His voice was full of authority. The old village chief was excited and quickly wanted to kneel. When he saw the old village chief kneeling, other villagers also quickly followed suit, afraid of neglecting Morax and Dao Yu, but Morax waved his hand to stop him. "We will stay in this village during this period to observe your life. You can call me Yanli," Morax said slowly, gently waving his sleeves, and the villagers stood up straight. "Old village chief, could you please take us around?" Morax's words sounded gentle yet unquestionable. "Of course, Lord Morax." With an excited expression on his face, Kemming leaned on his cane to guide the way in front of Morax and Dao Yu. Dao Yu glanced at the enthusiastic villagers around him and spoke up, persuading, "Don't follow everyone. Hurry up and get busy with your own affairs. I believe it won't be long before the whole village becomes even better with your efforts." As soon as these words were spoken, the villagers around them became even more excited. They shouted the names of Morax and Dao Yu once, and then scattered around. However, their excitement could still be felt in the conversation of 3 or 2 pairs. "I didn't expect the 2 demon gods to be so gentle and kind, it's really our blessing." Yes, Lord Morax is very majestic. Compared to him, Lord Dao Yu is relatively casual. Although Lord Dao Yu looks quite intimidating, I didn't expect him to be such a gentle demon god. Dao Yu and Morax naturally heard these conversations, and Morax's lips curved into a smile, looking in a good mood. Dao Yu also felt a burst of joy, and gaining people's recognition was undoubtedly a very fulfilling thing. Morax and Dao Yu followed Kemming towards his home and introduced the situation in the village to Morax and Dao Yu along the way. At this time, people had already mastered certain planting techniques, but only knew how to plant things with seeds and wait for harvest. In addition to planting, it is to collect fruits such as sunset fruits, apples, etc. to make the fruit belly. At this time, people had not yet mastered their animal husbandry and fishing abilities, and the only thing they could do in the water was to collect some lotus seeds in the pond to eat. Hunting for meat can also kill many people. They still use rough stone tools and lack the ability to forge iron. Every time they go hunting, they get injured, and there is no healing technique. If the injury is not serious, it will pass quickly. If it is serious, they can only wait for death. According to the old village chief, they are very grateful for the blessings of Morax and Dao Yu. If it were not for this, their lives would have been even more difficult. Hundreds of years ago, some wild beasts came to attack the village, but since the arrival of Morax and Dao Yu, these beasts have never attacked the village again. Therefore, the villagers are very grateful for the protection of their two demon gods. Every time they obtain prey, they will first offer it to the direction of the mountain, which is their habitat. The reason why we don't build a deity statue is because we are afraid of blasphemy. By the time Carving Ming arrived at home, Dao Yu and Morax had already gained a comprehensive understanding of the situation in this village, which was similar to their previous plan, and all aspects needed to be reformed. This place is also not suitable for survival. According to the previously agreed plan, they still need to find a suitable place to settle in for the village. Of course, there is more than one village on this land. This place is Shanhuizhai. After visiting each village one by one, Morax and Dao Yu will lead the people to migrate. Chapter 7. Village Observations. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dao Yu accompanied Morax into the engraved house, which was not made of wooden boards, but was built from round logs one by one, with uneven cuts. It is believed that it was completed with a stone axe. There were no furnishings inside the house, just simple stone bowls and a few stones that could barely be seen in the shape of chairs, which was completely different from what Dao Yu had imagined. Dao Yu remembers that in The Story of the Sun and the Moon, it was vaguely mentioned that the first throne always responds to the demands of the people, and it should not be so. Of course, perhaps he overlooked some details. However, it is precisely because the situation is not good that the value of the two demon gods Morax and Dao Yu can be reflected, which is also a good thing from another perspective. Kemming invited them into the room, and Dao Yu saw that the bed was just a slightly flat stone paved with hay. The old man appeared somewhat reserved, perhaps feeling ashamed to receive the demon lord in such a rudimentary place. Dao Yu feels quite good, after all he needs to do is hover in the air. He looked at Morax, and there was no change in Morax's face, only a hint of solemnity. It was probably a negligence of his own duty. I didn't expect your conditions to be so difficult. Since I have woken up, I have to take responsibility for you and give you a better life, Morax said. The old village chief was about to kneel upon hearing this, and the man accompanying him also had to kneel down. Morax spoke again. Let's waive the gift, this is also our negligence. Speaking of it, we also have a certain responsibility. His voice couldn't hear any emotion. Dao Yu continued. Elderly, are you trying to increase our sense of guilt by kneeling down to us all the time? If you see us as gods who can lead you towards a better life, then there's no need for that. He slightly accentuated his tone. To be honest, as a modern person, he could at most accept a bow and shake hands when meeting, and he felt a bit disgusted by such a big gift as kneeling. Kemming was a bit panicked and quickly stood up straight with the help of the man. I'm sorry, sir, it was my old age who offended me, he said. Dao Yu chuckled lightly, without any other meaning, just expressing a signal to ease the atmosphere. It's just a joke, don't take it to heart, elderly people. However, I still want to emphasize one thing, informing the villagers that there is no need to kneel down when they see us in the future. If they truly feel grateful, they can live a good life with this gratitude. Kemming's body trembled slightly. I will obey your orders. Obviously, Dao Yu's words had an impact on him. The surrounding villages are not without the protection of demon gods, but those demon gods have many demands, including worship, kneeling, and statues. Now that I see their demon gods so approachable and genuinely concerned about their lives, I cannot help but be moved. Morax didn't care at all and sat down straight by the bed, with his slender legs together and his hands crossed on his thighs, sitting dignified. Dao Yu sighed at Morax's extraordinary demeanor as he fell on his shoulder. Morax was the first to speak. We have already understood the situation in your village. Next, I would like to know how many villages are there near Shanhuizhai. That is, how many villages are there that worship me and the Lotus Demon God? Morax only knows his jurisdiction, but he doesn't know how many villages there are in his jurisdiction. Instead of searching for each village, it's better to have a rough understanding of the overall number of villages. This can save a lot of time and allow the people to live a prosperous life. Sir, according to our understanding, there are over a dozen villages near Shanhuizhai, most of which believe in Lord and Lord Dao Yu. The old village chief immediately replied that in fact, most of these villages only worship Morax, as it is closely related to their harvest. However, he said that there are 2 demon gods worshipped, the rest of the villages are mostly remote and have lost their faith in gods, but these villagers are aware of the existence of adults. Dao Yu secretly revealed the intelligence of the old man, and it seemed reasonable for him to become the village chief in the village. At least, his caring heart made him feel strange. So how does the situation of other villages compare to that of your village? This is also necessary to understand, as uneven development can lead to conflicts and wars. As for adults, the development of other villages is similar to ours. Some villages may be better, but overall, everyone's quality of life is on the same level. After the old village chief explained the overall situation, he began to introduce the situation of other villages in detail. Dao Yu and Morax listened quietly, while Morax nodded occasionally. Among the dozen or so villages mentioned by Kemming, there are nearly 10 villages that rely on hunting, planting, and gathering for their livelihoods, similar to this village. Most of the other villages rely on hunting and trading with other villages for their livelihoods. Overall, the atmosphere is relatively harmonious, although there may be some conflicts in trading, it does not escalate to the level of war. Dao Yu learned that nowadays, transactions between villages are mainly based on barter, which is an early form of commodity trading. These traded goods do not have a fixed standard of measurement, so villagers often argue about it. The scene of an argument is probably like that of an old lady in the village arguing, and engraved with a hint of dissatisfaction with this phenomenon. After all, his kind personality is indeed prone to suffer in this regard. So every time the transaction is engraved, it is left to his own son to handle, and he also expressed his satisfaction with his son. This old man is now like a child, pouring out his daily life and troubles to adults. Morax listened expressionlessly, but Dao Yu or Lianhua didn't show much expression. He would occasionally ask questions to understand some details, such as what people grow, when to trade, and where to trade. To the delight of Dao Yu, the most recent gathering was just 2 days later, and the trading location was in the engraved village. This way, we can first learn some things from the villagers, and during on-site inspections, we can have more understanding, which can also save a lot of time. However, what made Dao Yu headache was that he and Morax had to find a suitable place to live within 2 days and make a preliminary plan. The surrounding situation is generally like this. When people from various villages come to trade the day after tomorrow, representatives from each village will know the news of the adults awakening and experience their divine grace. After finishing speaking, with a look of reverence in his eyes, Kemming learned through conversation that Dao Yu was a gentle demon god. When he didn't know what to say or couldn't remember, it was Dao Yu guiding him, while Morax was even more majestic, silent throughout the entire process, occasionally showing a thoughtful expression. Chapter 8. Preliminary Understanding and Inspection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thank you very much for your explanation. I think we have a comprehensive understanding of the situation in each village. Dao Yu spoke up and floated up from Morax's shoulder. Morax nodded at Dao Yu. Next, we would like to take a look at your cultivated land. I wonder if your son can take care of it. Dao Yu wanted to see what was planted in the villagers' land, but the description given by the inscription was not very detailed. He only said that it tasted very sweet and hungry. At this point, the villagers have already mastered the fire, and they will use sparks struck by stones to ignite flammable materials and start a fire to cook, just using stone pots. They are also trying to make earthen pots with soil, but they really can't make them. When mentioning the use of fire, Inscription once again praised Morax, as it was produced by striking stones. This allowed them to transform from relying solely on lightning to preserve the fire, to their own mode of making a fire, which was much more convenient. Dao Yu sighed that the development process of villagers is related to the history of human development, but with the guidance of gods, their development appears to be quite rapid, which cannot be said to be the importance of knowledge. But most of these intelligences are held in the hands of the demon gods. Even in their slumber, the aura emitted by the demon gods will guide people to master these knowledge, giving them a mystical feeling. Dao Yu said that since there are already demon gods, it is not difficult to accept that the aura unintentionally revealed by the demon gods has a guiding effect. Keming's son is called Keiji, and he is a shrewd young man. Dao Yu can feel the wisdom shining in his eyes from time to time. When Carving Ming couldn't understand Dao Yu's meaning during the conversation, Carving Ji would supplement it on his behalf, which made Dao Yu appreciate this young man inexplicably. Perhaps this father and son are the ancestors of the Carving family, right? Approximately. When it comes to the Carving family, Dao Yu can't help but think of the future Jade Hengxing. Not to mention anything else, that cat ear, that figure ahem, that self-reliant personality and strict self-discipline made Dao Yu couldn't help but respect him, and another one was the workaholic Ganyu. However, these should be 3,000 or 4,000 years from now, and the most important thing now is to build Liyue well. Keiji is leading the way ahead, and the sun has already risen. Only scattered villagers can be seen busy in the village, and these villagers will first greet Dao Yu Morax, followed by Keiji. It can be seen that Keiji is very popular in this village. Carving oneself on the road is Dao Yu. Morax briefly introduced those crops, the most important of which is a round, earthy yellow thing. They usually stew and bake it. Upon hearing this, Dao Yu thought it was potatoes. It was really not easy for these villagers to master the cultivation of potatoes. Dao Yu thought that seed crops such as wheat, tomatoes, and corn would be planted on a large scale, rather than tuberous crops like potatoes. I really don't know how these villagers managed it. Other crops are common grains such as wheat, corn, etc. Wheat is usually cooked in soup, while corn is also roasted, but it is not as hungry as potatoes and is planted slightly less. The food collected mostly consisted of raspberries, apples, and sunset fruits. Of course, this name may not have been given yet. However, when the inscription took out these things, Dao Yu named them and thus obtained the right to name them. Morax didn't say much, it was similar to the name in his memory, so he didn't correct anything. Under the guidance of Keiji, Dao Yu and Morax came to the plantation and took a brief look. They found that it was indeed what they had guessed, and there were no problems with the planting technique. They encouraged them with a few words. Although both Dao Yu and Morax could see the cultivation of these crops, they lacked knowledge in this area. Morax had a comprehensive understanding of minerals, but was not very good at planting them. Although Dao Yu is a modern person, he has no theory and no practice, so he has a set of ways to eat these things. Dao Yu couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that these things still needed to be consulted with Sister Guijing. Guijing was good at this, but meeting Guijing would have to wait until the establishment of Liyue port and the signing of a contract with the Immortal. It was still too early. It is worth mentioning that the responsibility of Dao Yu and Morax is indeed to love, but both of them have the idea that teaching people to fish is better than teaching them to fish. They cannot rely on their demon gods to solve everything, but must teach people independence and autonomy. They only need to maintain the overall direction of Li Yu's development unchanged. Dao Yu and Morax briefly commented, and after Dao Yu gave some suggestions on how to eat, the two decided to go near Shanhui village to see if there were any suitable places for migration. Dao Yu had an idea for a long time, which was nothing more than the sea surface after Shanhui Zhai. However, before that, Morax waved his hand and the rough stone tools became more exquisite. Some stone tools that needed sharpness were also sharpened by Morax. He instructed the villagers not to harm him, so he pulled Dao Yu away at noon. Dao Yu couldn't help but feel a bit unsatisfied as he watched Morax transform into a dragon. After all, the female form of Morax is still very pleasing to the eye. However, these words cannot be spoken, otherwise they may be treated as abnormal by Morax. Dao Yu and Morax flew over the mountains where they had awakened and saw a small piece of land connected to the sea. Morax looked at this piece of land in thought, and Dao Yu spoke up. "I think this place is pretty good. The stretching mountains form a natural danger, facing the sea to the east and mountains to the west. Even if there are monsters or demons invading, we can use the natural danger to defend and use it as a foundation to ensure the stability of our people. It is this land where the tides are surging and some of them need to be suppressed." Morax also had the same idea. In addition, Li Min can mine ore and grow food in Shanhuizhai. By building a city near the sea to develop fishing, Li Min doesn't have to risk their lives hunting wild animals. If maritime transportation develops over time, it can bring more abundant resources to Liyue, so that the people will be prosperous and the world will return to their hearts. Well, this disposal is an alternative. We can go to other places and take a look. Although Dao Yu knew that this was the most suitable place, it would be biased to make a hasty decision. With Morax's temperament, he would not like such a hasty decision. Sure enough, Morax nodded at the dragon's head, and his gaze towards Dao Yu was more like a friend's gaze. What is said is absolutely right. It's not too late. Let's go somewhere else and try to finalize it before sunset. After sunset, we can discuss preliminary migration and development plans. In Morax's view, the demon god hardly needs rest, so there is nothing to discuss overnight. Dao Yu also felt that time was tight, so he did not refute it. After all, compared to the development and construction of Liyue, any daily routine can be put aside. Chapter 9. Questions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dao Yu and Morax quickly circled around Shanhui village, defining their territorial boundaries while also conducting corresponding inspections of suitable places to live in. When passing by several villages, the two of them hastily observed and left without disturbing the local villagers, confirming that the situation in the village was not much different from what was said by the inscription. Dao Yu and Morax also felt the breath of other demon gods. There were no less than 3 demon gods near Shanhuizhai, and they did not count the possible existence of demon gods in the sea. The Dao Yu in the northern part of Shanhuizhai knew it was the place of death, but death seemed to be still asleep, and the two did not stay much. In the end, before the sun set, I ran through the entire Shanhui village and finally decided to establish Liyue at the beginning to bless my people. However, just as Morax was preparing to repel the tide, Dao Yu stopped him. Moracos, we can wait a moment until the people have migrated here before receding from the tide, so that we can better lead the people. Dao Yu didn't finish speaking, and I believe that with the wisdom of Morax, he could definitely understand his meaning. Moraxton paused and pondered for a moment in place. It's reasonable that although I hold the power of the contract, I cannot constantly restrain everyone. Showing my divine power directly in front of everyone is a good way to govern. The two returned to the village where the inscription was located at dusk, and most of the villagers who had gone out had already returned. Fortunately, the villagers had a good harvest from their trip and did not cause any casualties. The praise from the villagers is the result of Morax and Dao Yu's blessings, so that the villagers don't have to worry about the food for the next 3 days and can focus on preparing to attend the gathering. The arrangement of the assembly also requires a certain amount of time. Through inscriptions, although the assembly is like setting up street stalls in various villages, whoever is interested in something will trade it based on the principle of equivalent exchange. The cleaning of the venue and preparation for exchanging items in 1 day are sufficient preparations, but there are still 2 demon god adults participating this time, which naturally needs to be more grand. Seeing the villagers returning from Dao Yu and Morax, they warmly welcomed them. The villagers also discovered more exquisite stone equipment and showed greater respect for Morax and Dao Yu. It was dinner time now, and Dao Yu didn't need to eat, while Morax didn't need to eat. After politely rejecting the dinner arranged by the girl, Morax waved his hand and a rudimentary stone room appeared in the village, right next to the engraved house, in the center of the entire village. The village head's house in each village is built in the center east of the village, facing north and south, with the central position reserved for the construction of the demon god temple. With a wave of his hand, Morax came out with a house, making Dao Yu sigh that he should go into real estate. In contrast, Dao Yu lacks creativity and only controls his abilities through destruction. Perhaps it is more appropriate to call it annihilation. Under the gaze of everyone, Morax and Dao Yu closed the door to the house. After a round trip, I think it would be most appropriate to establish Liyue in the coastal area on the other side of Shanhuizai. A cup of hot tea appeared in Morax's hand, which was picked by Dao Yu on the way. Although he had no hands, he could control his body's strength to pick these tea leaves and store them in his own body. The hot water was borrowed from the villagers. Dao Yu couldn't drink tea, but have you ever thought about how many villages near Shanhuizai would be able to accommodate so many people on that piece of land, not to mention the amount of work, if all of them were to migrate to the other end of the mountain? Morax frowned. Although he could use his divine power to build towers to accommodate more people, it was ultimately a hidden danger. Contradictions, conflicts, and wars were likely to breed with distribution issues. So according to your words, what should we do? Morax looked at Dao Yu. Since Dao Yu had raised this question, there might be corresponding solutions. Dao Yu didn't answer the conversation. He searched for knowledge in his mind and found that there was no effective way to solve the problem. Let's put this issue aside for now and work together to organize the problems that Liyue is facing. After much contemplation, Dao Yu put forward a suggestion: we cannot dwell on this issue, after all, there is more than one problem to be solved. Morax frowned as he did not notice any problems, some of which were simply lagging behind. In order not to be caught fishing, he had a plan in his mind. You may as well talk about it first, and then let me supplement it on your behalf. Dao Yu felt his heart skip a beat. This old dragon wouldn't have been affected by Babatosa's illness so early, would it? Morax must be testing my observational ability by doing so. As soon as I mentioned it, he agreed, obviously waiting for me to bring up this topic. Does this mean he doesn't believe in our alliance? Damn it, this old dragon is so cute and gloomy. Although his heart was going crazy, Dao Yu slowly spoke his thoughts. Besides the land issue, the primary issue is people's livelihood. I wonder if you have noticed that there is too little arable land near Shanhui village, and food is the foundation of people's livelihood. Shanhui village is rich in mineral resources, but there are too few things that rely on for survival, including fruits, prey, etc. Morax nodded slightly, using tea to conceal his embarrassment. He saw that Dao Yu was more concerned than himself, and the position of this reliable ally in his heart also skyrocketed. With even better workers are you allies. This issue cannot be underestimated. Once migration occurs on this basis, it not only leads to the inability to allocate land, but also the inability of the people to survive. Dao Yu was crazy in his heart and roast about the old fox's mind. It was really a bloody disaster to meet Morax. It would be better to meet Jin. At least, he would not let himself fight with Morax here. In addition, there are multiple demonic gods auras near Shanhuizai, which can be said to be a division of gods. Every move we make will attract their attention. If there is a misunderstanding, it may bring unpredictable consequences. Therefore, my suggestion is to stabilize these demonic gods first, and then consider the migration. Morax nodded again, feeling that everything he said made sense. It seemed that I, the demon god, was a bit negligent. He even said we would manage Liyue together, but he didn't expect these details to worry him. Morax felt a hint of guilt and said, in your opinion, how should we stabilize these demon gods? What? Dao Yu understands now. Morax is dissatisfied. Is he doubting my ability to question him? I don't have it, hiss. It seems like I'm expressing this idea between my words. What should I do? I'm waiting online, it's quite urgent. Cough, let's not talk about this issue for now. We need to consider how to let our people get through the days before migration. I think this is the most important thing at present. Dao Yu quickly shifted the focus and avoided discussing. Morax glanced at Dao Yu with satisfaction and nodded slowly, indeed. Sigh, with this look, it seems that I was just dancing on the red line of our contract, and Dao Yu's heart was sweating profusely. Chapter 10. Cold Night and Cold Jade. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, the two demon gods spent the night discussing how to make the people live a prosperous and beautiful life. In addition, Morax also drew inspiration from Dao Yu's idea of close and distant attacks. Morax planned to explore the demon god forces around Liyue and establish diplomatic relations with distant demon god level forces, in order to deter the small demon gods in the surrounding area. Of course, these are all things that villagers need to do as they gradually develop. With the material support of villagers, they can better reach trade agreements with other demon gods and help each other. The overnight conversation made Morax very happy, and he was extremely grateful to have accepted this ally, although it was forced to accept it. Dao Yu felt a group of divine beasts rushing past on the green grassland in his heart. Morax said that his half-hidden and half-hidden way of speaking could be said to have maximized the word reserved. But Dao Yu couldn't understand Morax's ideas and could only do everything in his power, striving not to miss any details, fearing that the omission of these details would turn the alliance's contract into ashes. The final result was still acceptable to Dao Yu, and Morax decided to teach people the technology and ability to smelt iron in order to drive production. After breaking away from self-sufficiency, he and Dao Yu inspected the surrounding demons and gods, established contractual relationships, maintained transactions, promoted the common development of both and even multiple people, and lived a better life together. These good developments were their chips. Dao Yu felt a bit tired, and the night's battle of wits and bravery made him feel a bit tired. Morax, I feel a bit tired. The continuous excitement makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. If possible, I plan to take a break. Morax had no choice but to feel a bit puzzled. He thought that at their level, rest was no longer a trivial matter. However, when he thought about the fact that Dao Yu was missing half of it, he was relieved. Of course I can, so I'll take a stroll around the village today and understand the villagers' thoughts. After finishing, I took a complicated look at Dao Yu and walked out of the room. Dao Yu's spirit gradually relaxed, and before falling asleep, he heard Morax's instructions to the inscription. The Lotus Demon God was overworked yesterday and needed to rest for a while. Please advise the villagers not to disturb him. What? Does Dao Yu mean that your statement won't be misunderstood? However, even Dao Yu couldn't control so much anymore, so he closed his gaze and fell asleep. When I regained consciousness again, it was already dusk, and my mind had changed from dull to clear. It seems like I still need to maintain my daily routine, he said. Dao Yu glanced at the stone house and found that everything was as old as before. He then walked out of the room and said, I hope you haven't slept for hundreds of years like last time. Stepping out the door, I saw a group of people gathered next to Morax and breathed a sigh of relief. Morax turned his head to look at Dao Yu, who calmly floated onto Morax's shoulder. You're awake, the trading teams from various villages have arrived. Come with me to take a look. Morax's voice was filled with concern. This made Dao Yu somewhat puzzled. Isn't squeezing labor a daily routine for Morax? Look at what kind of child Dao Yu has become, how could he still care about others coming? But he still asked me to accompany him for a stroll, and indeed he wanted to squeeze my value. The Lord of Lotus Demon God has woken up. The villagers discussed eagerly, and there were also some curious people in the crowd who looked at Dao Yu, thinking that these people were villagers from other villages. Dad, the Lotus Demon Lord looks very fierce. A little girl hid behind a man, gently shaking his arm, feeling a bit timid. Her voice was not loud, but everyone around her quieted down. The man was also in a hurry to grab the little girl and kneel down to apologize. "I'm sorry, Lord Lotus Demon God. My child is not sensible, please." Before kneeling down, Dao Yu stopped him and said, "There's no need to say." As he spoke, he flew straight towards the girl, and the people around him dared not speak, afraid of offending the Lotus Demon God. They also want to see if this Lotus Demon God is as gentle as the inscription they said. Morax understood that Dao Yu would not be angry, but he wanted to see how Dao Yu would handle it. Dao Yu guessed that this was Morax's test when he saw Morax not saying a word. Let's see how he treated his people. This old dragon still doesn't believe him. The man's legs trembled like chaff, wanting to say something but not daring to say it. His daughter's hand was filled with sweat, and when Dao Yu floated in front of him, the man was about to collapse. "Please." The villagers around me had a hint of unbearable expression on their faces, but they didn't turn their heads. They wanted to see what Dao Yu was going to do. "Well, considering your behavior, little girl, I will punish you." Dao Yu spoke slowly, and the little girl hid behind his father in fear. Half of the man's words were interrupted by Dao Yu, and he was even more frightened. Sweat couldn't stop flowing down his body. Just as he was about to plead, Dao Yu continued, "Let's punish you for taking us to see the goods brought by your village." He flew over the little girl's head and landed in a relatively comfortable position between her hair. Cluck, cluck. The little girl felt the softness and itching of the lotus body, and couldn't help but laugh out, "It's so itchy. Please take me to the place where your village representative came, as a punishment for your misjudgment just now," said Dao Yu gently. The people around breathed a sigh of relief, and the man suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is not punishment, it's simply a gift. There are over a dozen villages coming to trade, and it is undoubtedly an honor to be the first to receive 2 demon gods to visit. Please come and invite me," he said. Morax's lips curved into a smile, and Dao Yu always brought him a different feeling. In his impression, the demon god had to maintain his dignity in order to better resist. Now, it seems that gentleness is also a way. This. Keming looked at Morax and couldn't help but be taken aback when he saw the smile of this deity. The seemingly playful behavior of the Lotus Demon God did indeed reduce some resentment among those who had a certain prejudice against the demon god. Seeing the smile on the corner of Morax's mouth, he understood that all of this might be in the calculation of the demon god. Indeed, the demon god was still the demon god, with clever methods. Dao Yu's behavior immediately spread throughout the entire village, and representatives from each village became aware of it, reducing their fear of the unknown demon god. At the same time, rumors began to spread in the village about how majestic and gentle Morax and Dao Yu were, and for a moment, the confusion and unease in people's eyes turned into curiosity and awe.